crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you for being with us tonight. An interesting topic of conversation and a super qualified panel to discuss it. Appreciate you being with us, and a couple of reminders before we get started here tonight. Ways that you can call, text, email, join our conversation. You'll find those at the bottom of your screen. Also, Hollis Wright makes available attorneys from the firm each and every time we're on the air. So while we're speaking tonight, you have the opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis Wright. That's a free, off-air, and confidential conversation. So a great opportunity tonight about what we're talking about or whatever crosses your mind and you would like to speak with an attorney about it, the opportunity to do so tonight. Leading our conversation, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm great. You know, David, Michael Eldridge, one of our lawyers at our law firm, is really an expert in this area, which is kind of trucking litigation. And people ask a lot of times, you know, why are there so many times that you do trucking shows over the years? And the reality is we're on a crazy corridor of I-20, I-65, 459, finishing the northern perimeter and Beltway.
Right.
We have a lot of interstate in and around the Birmingham, Jefferson County area, and then out west and east through Tuscaloosa, through Anniston, et cetera. And so there are a lot of accidents that involve commercial vehicles. And these cases come in a lot of colors and styles and types, right? They're not all tractor trailers. Sometimes it's as easy as a local delivery company that has to follow certain rules and regulations. And so we just see a lot of these cases, and there are a lot of people that are impacted by commercial vehicles and accidents. And so that's one of the reasons why we do these. And, you know, I mentioned Michael is an expert in this area. He does a lot of this litigation, does a great job, and so we bring him on to be able to handle this stuff. So good to see you again, my friend. I get to see you every day.
You do. Unfortunately for you sometimes, I'm sure you think. But you're right. And another thing that, in terms of Alabama, that makes it unique with these commercial vehicles is that there's a lot of timberland when you go to rural Alabama. So you've got log trucks in southwest and west Alabama running daily. And so there is a lot of commercial vehicles in this state, and they're not simple cases. It's not like a regular auto case. From a legal standpoint, from a liability standpoint, from a defense standpoint, and a plaintiff standpoint, it's a totally subset of law as it relates to personal injury.
Can I ask something real quick on this kind of the 30,000 foot level here? We talk a lot about how cell phones have impacted many other areas of the law we discuss. In terms of these trucking cases, because, you know, my previous life was a news anchor, and there always seemed to be a trucking accident somewhere in the area. Has the prevalence of cell phones and distracted driving, are these cases, are trucking cases not decreasing? And are they, would you even say they're increasing because of driver error, somebody not paying attention?
I think across the board, distracted driving has increased the amount of accidents and has increased the reasons for why accidents are happening. When you talk about truckers, adding anything that's going to make it more likely that they're not paying attention to what they need to pay attention to, I would say the odds as it relates to them compared to a regular driver goes up exponentially, because the things they have to be focused on are so much more than a regular driver. So when you add in the fatigue, because they're driving for long hours, if they are driving. And the other thing about these cell phones, what we found is there's a ton of data on that can show you where they've been, how long they've been on the road, what they're doing on their cell phone. So there's a wealth of information that we're getting from those, and what it's showing is there's a high prevalence that people on their cell phone, the risk that they're taking is increasing perhaps whether they're going to cause an accident.
Yeah, you know, we've had to change, and we meet about this and talk about this, and we send out emails back and forth related to different types of questions we ask in litigation related to distracted driving. It's called discovery, but the short of it is, when a lawsuit's filed, a lot of times you have the ability to ask the other side for questions and documents and whatnot. You also can do independent evaluations of someone's cell phone and download the data. And as Michael was talking about, one of the things we do at our law firm is a lot of times we've changed the way that we ask those questions to establish whether or not something is a distracted driving claim. Michael mentioned it's not always cell phones. Sometimes it is distracted driving because someone's fatigued in a commercial setting. They're not supposed to put themselves in an environment to be fatigued because there are certain hours they're supposed to be on the road and certain hours they're supposed to rest, but it does happen.
Right.
So we've changed the way at our law firm that we look at these cases, and we've changed kind of the prism, if you will, of making sure we ask the right questions. Michael alluded to the fact that sometimes cell phones provide data. Well, the download that we receive with the experts that we use to download that data can determine how fast someone was going, where they were, what text messages they sent, what calls they received. A whole host of information can be used. We have a recent trucking case that I had up in North Alabama where we were able to determine that the average speed between point A and point B was actually about 10 miles an hour faster than what the tractor trailer driver disclosed in his discovery based on his cell phone alone. And so those are the types of things that we can do to probably help a claim.
And I'll give you another example. You asked about how cell phones have changed. When I first started, which compared to Josh was not that long ago, when we sent out discovery,
there's always subtle collegial jabs.
When we sent out discovery, when I first started doing litigation related to cell phones, it was limited to essentially, were you on your phone? Were you texting? Now with these downloads and smartphones, what an expert can look at is so much more than that. If you're uploading something, if you're on the internet, if you're downloading something to Facebook, if you're uploading something to Facebook, they can look at all those data points and figure out exactly what you were doing and exactly when you were doing it down to the second, which, 10, 15 years ago, we weren't even thinking about that because, first of all, cell phones didn't have those capabilities.
Right.
But with the growth of social media and how much people use their cell phones and they're addicted to their cell phones, that wasn't part of our life. Now it's become part of our reality, and we're changing just as society is changing, is figuring out how is it affecting us. So it's a ever-evolving topic.
A lot of times someone will lose their cell phone afterwards too because they know that download is coming. And we use that almost in a presumptive way to argue to the jury, argue to the judge that there's a reason why they lost that cell phone. People don't just lose their cell phones every day, right? Especially after an accident, if you lose your cell phone, there's generally a problem there. So, there are things that we can do to be creative as lawyers. We use those kind of tricks of the trade. I know we're getting kind of close to break, but I did want to ask this question before we go to break, Michael, and that is, explain, if you will, just in general terms, how truckers or commercial drivers have kind of a heightened standard that's different from you and I when we get on the road tonight and leave.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, but it's different because we're subject to the general rules of the road, and they are subject to not only what's called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is called the FMCSA. It is a government body that has a list of regulations that they have to abide by. And any one of those violations, for example, and we'll talk about what they are required to do as we go on, can first of all tell us what caused an accident, but they also guide you to show you exactly what the duty is of the motor carrier and the trucker, and that they abide by those requirements.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that because if you're involved in an accident with a commercial vehicle, you need a lawyer on your side to protect you that understands the heightened responsibilities that a commercial carrier has that could have prevented an accident.
All right, let's step aside. Our first break of the evening. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
That we would be able to use the resources of the many lawyers we have at this law firm to create a plan that had a lasting impact that also gave back to the community at the same time. And I think we've done just that with The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Before we head back into this conversation, a reminder that attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by right now. So a free, off-air, and confidential conversation. It's an opportunity that is yours for the taking. Just pick up the phone and give them a call. Josh?
Michael, when we went to break, we started unwrapping this concept that commercial carriers have kind of a heightened responsibility or a heightened series of duties that a general person operating a regular vehicle on the roads don't have. Can you talk just a little bit about that and kind of some of the things that you look for when you're evaluating a commercial case?
Yeah, so as it relates to the heightened duty, both of the driver and the commercial carrier, they fall under what's called the FMCSA. We do not, right? You don't have the ability to just go get in a truck and drive an 18-wheeler. If you are a trucker, you have a commercial driver's license. From the very beginning, you are under the FMCSA. So you've got to go and you've got to get training on how to drive a commercial vehicle. And then when you go get a job, there are FMCSA requirements for whether or not you can be hired. They do criminal background checks. They pull your traffic accident report to see how many accidents you've been in, if you've had DUIs, and they have to meet certain requirements in order to qualify to drive, which is why trucking companies are always saying we're hiring, because not anybody can drive, right? It's a high demand. Then once you are hired, there is every trucking company has to have what's called an FMCSA file on you, and in there it's going to be log books, right? So these are books that show where I've been, how long I've been driving, making sure that I'm not going over the requirements of the FMCSA, because I can only drive for X amount of hours, and then I've got to rest before I can crank the truck back up. If you're in an accident, the FMCSA is going to say that if it was a total loss of another vehicle or someone was seriously injured or killed, that you have immediately got to have to go to the hospital and get drug tested, that you've got to preserve these logs as the motor carrier. So all of those things, they don't just do that because they're good companies and they're good people. They have learned over time that it's very, very important. So it's a regulated industry, and these are the regulations. If you get into an accident, there's no requirement unless a police officer comes to you with a warrant and says, we have a warrant for you to go get a drug test. And by the way, you could refuse that.
Yeah.
If you're a commercial driver, you cannot. You are under the FMCSA, and so it's a totally different subset of laws that they're subject to.
Yeah, and commercial drivers aren't just tractor trailers. We talked a little bit about this in the first segment. You know, it could be a local delivery truck that never leaves the state of Alabama. They still could qualify under our Public Service Commission requirements, which adopts much of the FMCSA that Michael's been talking about as it relates to hours of service, types of insurance, etc. It could also be an electric company that travels from state to state. There are just a lot of types of commercial vehicles that may not fit the traditional mold that you think of, which is a tractor trailer on the road.
And let me jump in there too. Within the FMCSA, there's it goes the other way too. There are certain drivers that even have more stringent requirements under the FMCSA. For example, hazmat vehicles. If you're carrying chemicals, gas, oil, things like that, then you're going to be subject to even stringent laws and regulations under the FMCSA. So Josh is exactly right. Local drivers may not be subject to the entire FMCSA, but they are subject to the FMCSA as commercial drivers. There's also drivers that are subject to even harsher laws than a regular trucking company.
And also, let's take a bus driver that drives a commercial bus that's going from state to state. They have certain responsibilities, and there are insurance requirements for a bus company that are unique and different from a regular hauler of product. So the reality is, if you're involved in a commercial case, you can pretty much guarantee there's always going to be a minimum of $750,000 to $1 million worth of insurance, and a lot of times there's excess coverage on top of that. So all of these claims are generally insured, and that is kind of what helps drive and manage the litigation itself, that there's insurance out there to protect individuals that have been injured at no fault of their own in commercial related cases.
So we're talking about trucking cases, and in my mind I'm thinking 18-wheelers, okay? Yep. We also have done shows about car accidents, like my SUV, okay? But we are so much everything gets delivered now, especially post-pandemic, and even in the midst of the pandemic, to where so many things were, groceries being delivered or all kinds of gifts, everything getting delivered. So you're saying there is kind of that middle ground is a little fuzzier than we think, I guess, between what is a just an innocent regular old car driver versus a trucking company. There is a middle ground there that maybe a layperson like myself doesn't realize is closer to a trucking case than a regular vehicle case.
Well, I'll let Michael handle that, but this is one of the many reasons why you want a lawyer involved early on to be able to classify your claim into the right category.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about delivering groceries, things like that, by the way, that's another nuanced topic. Yeah. But they're not, those drivers, right, if you work for Shipt, you're not a commercial driver. Being a commercial driver has to do with the type of vehicle that you're driving, that the vehicle that you're trying to drive is in a class of vehicles that is considered a commercial vehicle. So if I'm driving a Hyundai from Publix to your house to deliver groceries, I'm not a commercial driver, so I don't fall into the FMCSA. Now, I may be acting in the line and scope of my employment with my employer, and they may be on the hook for any of my conduct if I cause an accident, but that's going to be different than a commercial vehicle. Where I think what you're talking about with these buses and FedEx drivers, those types of vehicles could be in a class of vehicles that are commercial, and therefore they're going to fall under the FMCSA and those regulations.
Michael, what do you see as far as what separates firms that handle these cases early on as it relates to getting involved in getting these claims investigated? What is it that's important about immediate investigation of these claims to make sure you're protected, so that you got to go to the right law firm that handles these cases?
So one of the reasons I work at Hollis Wright is because of the background of what I used to do. At least I believe that. I used to defend trucking companies, and there's a lot of great trucking companies out there, and a lot of companies I've defended were good companies and good people. But when there was a bad accident, we called it a rapid response situation, and their defense attorneys were on the ground. I've watched ambulances leave representing the trucking company after an accident. So they are on the ground. We can talk about it in the next segment, but having someone on the ground is very important, because I promise you, the trucking company is out there. They're talking to witnesses. They're talking to the police officer. They have their experts out there doing measurements of the scene, doing total global investigation and evaluation from day one.
You need someone on your team to do the same thing, and you can do it through a relationship with a law firm on a contingency fee basis, where you pay nothing to have that same quality of care and that same quality of representation to be on the ground for you, protecting you and your claim. We can unwrap that a little bit more when we come back from break in the commercial context.
All right, our final break of the evening. As we go to break, a reminder, wherever you are on social media, Hollis Wright is there as well. Just search the term, whatever your preferred form of social media is, you'll find it there. A great educational and informational resource for you. Stay tuned. We're coming right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. In court, attorneys are not allowed to tell juries certain things. For example, we cannot talk about a defendant's net worth, meaning the defendant's ability, resources, or insurance to pay a verdict. In this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, why can't lawyers talk about a defendant's net worth to a jury? Now, Rule 403 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states, in part, relevant evidence may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. Long-standing Alabama cases have held that the net worth of a defendant falls under this catch-all rule and is to be excluded. The reasoning behind the rule is that if a jury knows a defendant is wealthy, then the jury might award more money to the plaintiff. And this goes one step further. If an attorney makes any remarks that suggest the defendant is responsible because he is wealthy or rich and the plaintiff is poor, that can be grounds for a new trial. If you're ever on a jury, the reality in our state is this. In almost every lawsuit that goes to trial, the attorneys representing both the plaintiff and the defendant have already looked at whether there's sufficient insurance coverage or assets to satisfy a verdict. Most likely, the parties would not pursue a civil lawsuit if damages could not be paid after a jury returns a verdict. So even though lawyers cannot mention the net worth of a defendant during trial, there likely are resources available to pay a verdict in court. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. And remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. And as always, thanks for watching The Attorneys right here on WBTN 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, the final segment here. So if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis Wright, you've got about 6 minutes to do so. So jump on the phone and get in touch with them. Josh?
So we started this conversation before the break, but let's talk about this just a bit. What goes into an investigation after there's been a commercial vehicle accident from our perspective?
Well, let me start with this. So the reason that there is typically an investigation that happens so quickly is because when there is an accident with a commercial vehicle, almost always someone is seriously injured. Because unlike your car and my car, which probably weighs somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 pounds, depending on what kind of car it is, these vehicles can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. So we're talking about sometimes 25 times more than the other vehicle. So people who are involved in accidents with commercial vehicles are typically very, very injured. And so that's the reason the investigations, as they call them, rapid response investigations happen. And so on both sides are trying to get the same information, but when you get it is so important. So first off, you're going to go to the scene, and typically you're going to take a mechanical engineer that we call an accident reconstructionist, and they're going to survey the entire scene. And these guys now, they can do 3D basically models of everything that happened. And then from the scene, well, first of all, at the scene, there's more that goes into that. They're looking for gouge marks. They're looking for any other type of evidence. But from the scene, they'll do a total scene reinvestigation. They're going to go to the truck. And that's where you're going to learn a lot, because there are requirements for the brake lines, these air brake lines, and they're going to run tests on them. There is a black box within this, within almost every commercial vehicle that's going to tell you the speed, any sudden reactions that happen, slamming on the brakes, evasive maneuvers. They're going to look for other physical evidence within the truck. They're going to, some of these have these ECM downloads where you can, determine video dashboards, things like that. Right, we're seeing a lot more electronic logs, right? All of this is being kept in the truck. Some of these trucks are looking exactly, have cameras that are looking exactly at what happened. So when you get that information, and being there to get that information is very, very important, because I promise you, the trucking company, and as they should, is out there getting that information, and they're going to use it to the best of their advantage. So having someone who understands, number one, where to go, but also who to take with you and what to look for is so, so important.
There's also, David, a medical component to a lot of these cases, because the statistics bear out that roughly a third of the catastrophic and death-related cases have some level of distraction involved, whether it be alcohol, whether it be cell phone or some other, maybe fatigue. Right. And so, there is a medical component a lot of times that you want to go and investigate and get a copy of the blood alcohol test that may have been done, or if there was a breathalyzer done. You want to go look at someone's medical card. I had a case not so long ago where a commercial driver driving individuals to a healthcare facility had a heart attack and died and caused a catastrophic injury and an amputation. And although that sounded like a complete accident, when we dug into it even more, we learned that the driver should have never been on the road because he had not completed his medical card that was required during certain intervals. Wow. And that person had already had a heart attack in the past, and they were there was a super potential for another cardiovascular event, and that's exactly what happened in our case. So, sometimes you just want to have the right counsel to be able to go through those cases. So there's a medical component in addition to the stuff that Michael talked about. We have just about 2 minutes remaining time, just enough for a final thought from both of you. Michael, if you would, you go first, please.
Well, I think what we just hit on, having experience, most of my career, I've worked for trucking companies. And like I said, by and large, most of these companies are great. They follow the FMCSA, they're doing what they should do, but there is also a lot of competition, just like in our industry. And there is timelines that they've got to meet in order to get paid if they don't get a delivery on time. And what happens is people often don't do what they're supposed to do and what they're required to do. That's why it's regulated. It's regulated because it's such a dangerous industry, and people can get hurt if they don't do what they're supposed to do. But the fact is, once someone does get hurt, it gets very, very complex. Right. And it's taken me over a decade to just scratch the surface of figuring this out. And there's people, like I said, they're Josh's age, that have been doing this for longer than me, that are on the ground figuring it out. And so having a law firm that's qualified to do that is so, so important. And having experienced litigators that know the trucking industry is very, very important.
And I would just add to that you want to be able to go to a law firm that has the relationships and resources to hire the experts that are necessary in cases. And experts come in a lot of different ways. It's not just an accident reconstructionist that reconstructs the accident. There may be biomechanical issues of how someone received their injury in their car in a commercial case where that would be necessary to have that individual. There may be DOT-related experts, and then sometimes damage, life care planners, et cetera. So you want to go to a firm that's got the ability to get those experts involved.
Gentlemen, appreciate the time.
Good job.
Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. We always appreciate whenever you join us each and every Sunday night, and we'll look forward to looking for you next weekend once again when you join us. See you then, folks.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.